It would be the same as pointing his sword at all of them. But the MC already knew this from the start, and in fact, he had already planned it. He asked the ghost if he didn't remember the words he had said before, that there were two ways to fight a strong opponent. One was to have enough strength to defeat an entire army alone, and the other was to raise and command one's own army. An isolated hunter was useless against a hunter in a powerful alliance. It was completely overwhelming. The MC had a plan from the beginning, so he approached the Sword Saint and asked if they could talk. He stated that he was very shocked by what had happened, and didn't understand the reason for the attack, as this was the first time he had seen him. Furthermore, the MC was a huge fan of the glorious Sword Saint. Of course, the Sword Saint didn't believe him, likely still thinking the MC was an assassin sent by the Black Dragon who had killed 4,093 people. In other words, a complete conspiracy in his eyes. The Sword Saint then declared that the outside world and Babylon weren't very different, because ever since he entered the tower, everyone had pressured him every single day to join a guild, yet he had firmly rejected all those offers. The reason was that he wanted to show everyone that in this tower, it was possible to reach the top on one's own, without bloodline, solitude, or affiliations, unlike the outside world, which was tainted with useless things. He stated that a single person could become the best with a sword, and he wanted to give hope to the people. However, instead, what had they been doing? They had all become stones that stagnated the world. Viper began shouting, saying that he hadn't helped with the raids on the 5th, 7th, and 9th floors either. The Countess added that if she had used his influence in the outside world, the food shortage in the tower wouldn't be so severe, and the tower's society might have been more safely stabilized. Finally, the Black Witch added that if he was the #1 ranker, then he should take on his responsibilities as the #1 ranker. However, the Sword Saint told them to shut up and questioned if they were adults, as they were constantly crying, and if by any chance he was their grandfather. If they had so much nonsense to say, they should talk to their swords. Hearing these words, the MC began to question them, as they were still fighting even with only 10 people around, because even the NPCs on the 11th floor had gathered to save their own country. But as hunters, they should focus on clearing the 10th floor instead of pointing fingers at each other and holding grudges. Wouldn't it be better for them to focus on their objectives? If this continued, they would be worse than the NPCs themselves. All of them were asking for their help. Even if he was perhaps just a hologram created by the tower, they still said their nation was on the verge of collapse. How could they, as summoned heroes, put the Empire second? Because if you solve problems others can't, then you are a hero. For this reason, they should focus on clearing the rest of the floors, just as they did with the 11th. The Paladin was the first to sheath her weapon, agreeing with the MC's words, and even if she didn't understand why the Sword Saint attacked, it was clear that this wasn't the time for them to be fighting each other, and so she would make a small sacrifice. She then showed everyone that she possessed a lie detection ability, and it was no exaggeration to say that this ability was what earned her the position of vice captain of the civil militia. Now, if the MC and the Sword Saint trusted her words, she would ensure that she validated their statements. The MC realized she was the perfect opportunity, so he declared that he would believe her, and the Sword Saint said the same, as out of all of them, she was the only one who had never harmed another human being. She then declared that they could make their statements. The first question came from the Sword Saint, asking if the MC had assassinated more than 4,000 people. The MC confirmed that he had, and at that very moment, the Sword Saint began to declare that he was a mass murderer who had deceived them. However, the Paladin stated that it was a lie. In other words, he hadn't killed more than 4,000 people. The Sword Saint began to get confused and break out in a cold sweat, and he declared that this was because he was an elite assassin. The MC confirmed that he was, but of course that was a lie. The Sword Saint began to say that he thought the Paladin would mediate the questions without lying, yet she herself had asked if they trusted her from the beginning, or was he perhaps going back on his word? The Sword Saint said it wasn't possible that he hadn't killed anyone, but the MC stated that he had killed, and it had been only one person, and because that person had deserved it, and if he hadn't killed the person he did, he would have become a serial killer. After all these declarations, everything the MC had said was true. Even the ghost was embarrassed, saying that he had told the old man not to rely solely on things like abilities. Then the MC approached the Sword Saint, saying that it seemed there had been a great misunderstanding, and of course he was happy that it had been a simple misunderstanding. However, if the guild leaders hadn't protected him, he probably would have died. The MC thought he needed something from the Sword Saint, perhaps an apology. The Paladin agreed with the MC's statement, as the Sword Saint was completely wrong. The Sword Saint began to stammer. How would he act? Despite her reputation as a pure person, the Paladin was still part of the 5 great guilds. Would he lie, or reveal his ability to explain his actions? He could silence the MC by killing him, just as the Flame Emperor had done. Sometimes when people are in the wrong, they blame or distrust others, much like the Flame Emperor revealed his evil nature by trying to silence the MC. For this reason, the Sword Saint's true character would be decided by his choice. He then apologized, admitting he was wrong. He had thought carelessly, leading to presumptuous actions that almost caused him to kill someone for no reason. Until now, he had always based someone's death on his own judgment, believing that anyone who deserved to leave the world should die as soon as possible. The MC noted that instead of doubting the Paladin, making excuses with his ability, or even killing the MC to silence him, the Sword Saint chose to accept his guilt, and for that, he unhesitatingly begged a rookie hunter for forgiveness. And the phrases that came to the MC's mind were, "I'm sorry for being wrong. From now on, I would never kill anyone because of my ability. I want to live. Please forgive me." And all of it was true. Seeing such sincerity from the Sword Saint, the MC said one thing. He asked if the Sword Saint could teach him the art of swordsmanship. To be more precise, he needed a sparring partner. He had a teacher, but no one to duel against, and he wished the Sword Saint could be his partner. However, he corrected himself. In truth, he wanted to forgive him without receiving anything in return, but he would feel embarrassed, as it would make him seem superior, when in fact he wasn't even that impressive. For the MC, having the Sword Saint as a sparring partner would be enough. Since their swords had already crossed, he felt somewhat awkward having to apologize to someone as if he were superior. For this reason, he wanted the Sword Saint to teach him his best swordsmanship technique. Hearing everything the MC had declared, the Paladin affirmed that everything he said was true. Witnessing all of this, the Inquisitor was the first to rejoice, exclaiming that he had never seen such a sincere apology in his entire life, calling it almost a divine miracle. But the Countess immediately began to complain, asking them not to ruin the happy ending, even though her money didn't mean it was all in vain. However, no one paid attention to her. The Sword Saint began to declare how he could have judged such a kind person so wrongly. He said that if the MC wanted a sparring partner, it would be his pleasure. He would be ready whenever the MC wished. He even said the MC could call him Grandpa Marcus, and started spouting a lot of nonsense, saying he wanted the MC to meet his granddaughter, or perhaps even marry her. However, the MC remained calm. The Sword Saint's expression quickly changed, asking if the MC wasn't interested in his granddaughter. Gongja corrected himself, saying it wasn't that. He simply wasn't interested in dating anyone. A commotion of shouts erupted, and the ghost began to say that, as he had mentioned before, the old man was very annoying. So annoying that he never listened to others, and it wouldn't be surprising if he ended up earning a title called God of Annoyance. The MC declared in his thoughts that he wished he hadn't discovered that. But at that very moment, moment, the system announced that the MC had finished the 11th floor in first place, and from now on, he would receive the completion rewards. Since he had finished first, the reward would be delivered to him first. They had already heard about the completion conditions for floors 12 to 20 before returning, but he wanted to know what kind of reward this would be. A window appeared before the MC, and in short, the MC had managed to choose one of the Empire's positions and would receive corresponding skills and attributes. The choice he made now would decide his path up to the 20th floor. As the MC had said before, from the 11th to the 20th floor, the theme was the staging of heroes and the Demon King. Hunters would assume positions within the Egan Empire, receiving skills and attributes, and the top contributors from previous floors would have the privilege of choosing these special positions before anyone else. The MC had a position in mind, but he wanted to see the Demon King's reward. The objective was clear and simple. He had to kill all of the top 10, excluding himself. If he did so, the Demon King's authority would immediately send the MC to the 99th floor. Seeing this option, the MC was shocked. Now, which one should he choose? Obviously, the ghost said this was a trap, and the MC knew it because there was no way the Flame Emperor wouldn't have chosen this reward, since in his previous life, instead of being on the 99th floor, he stopped at the 40th floor. Therefore, this reward was nothing more than a trap. He probably chose this reward, realized it was a trap, and returned to the past. However, it was tempting. What if he went to the 99th floor? But the ghost told the MC not to do it, as he had spoken with someone who experienced the 99th floor and failed. This option was one of the worst traps. The MC questioned if the boss of that floor was really that strong, and the ghost said that wasn't it, or rather, there was no such thing as a boss. It was something far more sinister. Anyway, he had warned him as a friend, and he didn't want to admit it, but the MC was doing very well and would eventually clear the 99th floor. Then Gongja said he would do things the right way. He would follow the safest route and even ignore the rewards, as he wanted to see how things would unfold. At that moment, he declared to the others that a reward window had appeared for him. The Black Witch said she was truly bored because it was taking too long, and the MC stated he wouldn't select any reward. The Paladin questioned the MC why he had done that, but at the same moment, the Sword Saint said he understood why the MC had made that choice. However, he questioned if it was truly necessary to ignore the rewards. Nevertheless, the MC simply said he regretted nothing. Then the Sword Saint chose the goddess's reward, and his position would be that of Chief of the Egan Empire Knights. Immediately, several knights appeared. The next to receive a reward was the Inquisitor, and he said it seemed like a game of cops and robbers, but for everyone to understand what he was talking about, he would show them. Everyone was surprised. It truly was a game of cops and robbers. The Inquisitor said they should call the goddess's allies cops, and those who sided with the Demon King robbers. It seemed that siding with the robbers would certainly have disadvantages, as the Paladin would quickly discover them. He added that the MC's choice wasn't all that great, but he would respond, so he chose the position of Grand General of the Empire. Viper ended up choosing the position of Chief of the Royal Bodyguard. The Paladin chose Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Black Witch chose the position of Chancellor. Lastly, the Countess chose Minister of Finance. Thus, everyone chose their respective positions. At that moment, the system began to report who had claimed the rewards. One person had not claimed a reward. 8 people received the goddess's reward, and 1 received the Demon King's. Obviously, after seeing such a notification, chaos ensued. Then the Black Witch declared that, as the master of the Black Dragon Guild, whoever chose the Demon King's reward would suffer the most painful death of all, and asked the Paladin to begin interrogating everyone present. The first person she interrogated was the least likely. She questioned if the MC had chosen the Demon King's reward, but he denied it, and of course that was true. So she interrogated them one by one, leader by leader, until she reached the last of them, who was the Black Witch, and it wasn't her either. They began to wonder, how could this be? If it wasn't any of the 10, then who was it? And the Paladin told them not to panic. The Inquisitor, at that moment, said that it took them over 10 years to become the 5 great guilds and cooperate with each other. In other words, it was difficult to trust anyone not from the 5 great guilds, and they didn't have 10 years to build trust with the others present. The Paladin tried to stop the Inquisitor, saying that efficiency wasn't what mattered now. However, he had already activated his skill, and Viper was advancing alongside them, so they killed them one by one to get to the last of them, who was obviously also killed. The system itself warned that none of the 3 were agents of the Demon King. The Inquisitor declared that they were now in a very bad situation, as their 10-year connection was about to be destroyed. The Paladin declared that she had warned him to wait, but just as the Inquisitor was about to speak, his arm was cut off, or rather, caught in the crossfire between the Sword Saint and Viper. The Paladin then said she would trust the MC's judgment, because since he was the only person who refused the rewards, he was certainly the only one who couldn't be the traitor. Seeing that madness before him, the MC wanted to ask the ghost if all the people he attracts are psychopaths. However, the ghost merely said that the MC hadn't given up the reward just knowing this would happen. However, the MC said there was tension among the top rankers, and he presumed a fight would start if there was a traitor. For this reason, he gave up the rewards, but he didn't imagine it would be this bad. So the MC approached the Paladin and asked if she could tell him a little about the Inquisitor. She replied that he had always been like that. More specifically, when they entered the tower, religion was a big problem, and the various religions were always fighting each other. It was at that point, when the Inquisitor appeared, that he killed everyone. The MC remembered that, in his past life, the religious groups had indeed reached a peaceful agreement, but it was probably the media covering them. The Inquisitor said he regretted his judgment and knew that what was happening was because of his actions, but to stop all that fighting, he needed the MC to ask the Sword Saint to stop the battle. The MC tried to get the Sword Saint's attention, saying they should resolve this fight through dialogue. He was asking in the name of his granddaughter, and if she ever entered the tower, he would surely meet her, so he couldn't ignore the words of his future great-grandson. The Sword Saint said he still hadn't forgiven them and wouldn't stop this fight just because he heard the MC. However, he realized that when they crossed swords, he could kill them at any moment, so once they found the traitor, he would certainly kill him immediately. The MC continued, saying he could kill him later. Then he began to say that they should calm down, because as long as they didn't know who the traitor might be, they might never find him. However, this wasn't the most important thing, as they could resolve this crisis without finding the traitor. The Paladin questioned the MC about how this would happen, since whoever chose the Demon King's reward aimed to kill all of them. However, the MC told them to look more closely at what was written in the quest. According to him, the Demon King's core was on the 20th floor, and that's why they shouldn't focus on the traitor. He would probably be covered in fear, or perhaps the system itself had forcibly created a traitor to achieve its objectives. If they got rid of him, the rewards would also disappear. So it was a very simple and easy problem to solve. They should climb the tower and break the Demon King's core. When the MC opened the door, a sound of rain was heard, but it wasn't normal rain. It seemed to be similar to blood. The soldiers, seeing that rain, began to fall into despair, and no one understood what was happening. However, the MC calmly walked among them and broke the glass. That rain was the result of the Demon King having manifested at that instant. He began to speak, questioning if the Empire really thought they could defeat him by sending people from another world against him. They could even send more if they wanted, but they were still humans, therefore flawed beings, and those who don't see humans as humans shall be swallowed by their own wickedness. The system gave them the mission, and in summary, they had to stop the Demon King or make him retreat, taking advantage of his weakened form. Now I ask you, how on earth was that weakened? Obviously, seeing the mission objective and such a monster before them, they began to wonder if it was truly possible to complete that mission. The MC said they should calm down, because the tower didn't give missions they couldn't complete, and they weren't mere hunters either. For example, Viper was the chief of the Royal Guard, so he should trust them, because this stage couldn't be completed with just the hunter's powers. That's why he had to treat the NPCs as if they were real people, and guide them into battle. As commanders, they had to act like commanders. Since the Paladin was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, they needed to find the Emperor, because an army without its leader nearby would have its morale crushed. As for the Inquisitor, the MC didn't like him much, but it wasn't the time for conflict. Unlike the MC, the Inquisitor said he liked him much more now. However, the MC simply stated that the soldiers were in front of the castle walls, so the Inquisitor should control them on his own, and no matter what happened, he had to defend the castle walls, because if their defenses fell, the stage would be over. The Inquisitor declared that he would protect them with his own life. Thus, everyone went to their respective positions, and since the top 10 had already received their rewards, the other hunters were able to enter the floor. Cutting to another scene, the Black Witch approached the MC, and he questioned how she had reached him so quickly. She replied that it was her unique skill, called teleportation, which allowed her to teleport anywhere within her field of vision. Obviously, such an overpowered skill had to be copied, and even the ghost agreed that the MC could use his hack to steal this ability. However, continuing the conversation, the MC questioned what she was doing there instead of going to the castle walls. She replied that she obviously came to take him with her, because the MC possessed a sword that made all the NPCs on the 11th floor admire him. Like it or not, they needed to boost the morale of this army. That's why the person the soldiers needed now wasn't her, but the MC. Suddenly, she extended her hand to the MC and said that he needed to verbally consent to teleport with her, as this was the restriction of her skill. The MC asked if it was alright for her to reveal her skill's restriction, as it could be a trump card, but she simply replied that she was currently the Chancellor of the Empire, and there was nothing strange about a Chancellor using her trump cards to protect her nation. So the MC consented, and they were thus teleported to the castle wall. Seeing the state of the soldiers, the MC realized something. NPCs were different beings from real people, and even if they were illusions, their fear was still real. The Black Witch told the MC to pay attention to what she was about to do, as she couldn't simply retreat after only showing her evil side, nor had she become the master of the Black Dragon Guild for nothing. At that very moment, she called the soldiers' attention and began to declare that they should gather their strength, for they were the Empire's one true wall. Looking at her, the soldiers began to feel a ray of hope. She continued, saying that as long as they stood, the Empire would not fall. Suddenly, she grabbed the MC's arm and raised it. At that very moment, the holy sword began to shine, and the rain, for a brief moment, stopped falling. Hold on. Do you remember that the MC was killed by the general on the 11th floor? And since he was now E-ranked, he would receive a penalty for using the skill. No one knew why, when, or how it happened. However, when he appeared, the red rain began to fall. When the rain fell, blood covered the ground, and every time a nation fell, the dominion of humans began to shrink, and the history of humanity became shorter and shorter. Every time the Empire's territory vanished, only the rain fell and continued to fall. An incessant rain resembling blood, and this was the cause of everyone's despair. Royal historians solemnly used their ornate quills. They accepted their fate to write, and thus, humanity was extinguished by its own hands. The master of nightmares, king of all demonic creatures, historians named him as follows, the Demon King. When that intense glow appeared above the castle walls, people began to feel a ray of hope, as they thought the goddess was protecting them. But that was wrong. It hadn't been such a great authority, and the rain had only stopped where the light of the holy sword reached. However, small things are sometimes enough, and for humans who had nothing, far from being small things, this was already enough to rekindle their strength. Initially, the reason there were no NPCs in the royal chamber was because each of the dignitaries had abandoned the Empire, and it was probably for this reason that the tower chose the Empire as a stage, just like the abandoned children in the mansion on the 10th floor. At that very moment, the Black Witch finished her speech and questioned the MC why he was looking at her that way. Was a Ukrainian speech really that bad for him? She says her old country was full of communists, and while she didn't like them much, they were great at making speeches, so she picked up a few things here and there. The MC didn't understand what she meant by that, but it was probably a joke. She asked the MC what he was going to do now, as they needed to protect the castle walls. Well, the Black Witch's S-rank ability was called teleportation, so he could simply teleport near the Demon King immediately, but they would instantly be surrounded by monsters. So the MC told her they needed to create a situation where he would be in isolated combat against the Demon King, and therefore, while the NPCs were resisting, they should gather the hunters, because at least with their help, they shouldn't be massacred. Returning to the previous topic, he asked her to transport him directly to the Demon King. She questioned if he was perhaps trying to commit suicide. Well, it was fair for her to justify herself and have those doubts, however. The MC planned to win, as he also had an ace up his sleeve. The Black Witch merely said she hoped his sword was sharp enough to pierce the boss. At that moment, the Demon King began to speak, saying that the goddess enjoyed fun games, but wasn't it pathetic to be called a final combat? Light? What good would it be for those who wouldn't even live to see tomorrow? Since he wanted so much to show his own light, he would give them a taste of his light. In that instant, the Demon King attacked, defeating several soldiers instantly, while others were gravely wounded. Amidst this attack, one of them ended up being killed. The Black Witch remembered that both the Sword Saint, the Inquisitor, and Viper should be on their way with their troops, and the Paladin was probably looking for the Emperor as the MC had requested. So the only person remaining was the Countess, and in the end, she wasn't the traitor either. However, this was concerning, as the Countess was the only one who had connections from the tower to the outside world. But the Black Witch said they had no time for lamenting, because they should focus on what was before them. Looking at the map, the MC realized that the demonic army had changed formation and were probably attempting a charge. In that instant, they teleported to the front line of battle. Arriving there, the ghost wanted to tell the MC something, that from that moment on, a new training would begin, and he should last at least at minimum 30 seconds. Because to win that war, he needed to become the people's hope, and no matter how long, he just needed to show the scene that he was holding off the monsters on his own. No one becomes a hero by living 30 years, but when everyone desperately needs 30 seconds, giving them those 30 seconds is what makes someone a hero. That's why he should become one. The ghost wanted to teach the MC a few things when he reached the 20th floor, but it was time to practice a bit. He should pivot his back foot, plant his front foot firmly on the ground, and calmly look forward. He noticed there were two goblins in front of him, and the ghost added that in a fight, what matters isn't an absolute second, but rather a relative second. That's why he should use his sword to blind them and steal that 1 second from them. At that moment, the MC's sword became faster than his 1 second, and in that instant, what everyone needed was a true hero. So the MC killed one after another, and he was so fast that before one goblin's head head fell, he was already killing the next. That was the symphony of the sword, and his movements were like music, a low note preparing the ground for a high note, and he was connecting one with the other. His sword was flowing continuously, and since the MC was a novice, he should have that 1 second no matter what. That's why he shouldn't lose control of time. After killing one, he had to find the next. He should live every second to the fullest, and he wouldn't truly be living if he just let time flow, because one only truly lives when dedicating something to time. All this killing he had done had only lasted 10 seconds. In that instant, the MC began to question something. Why did the tower give an X rank ability to someone like him? It wouldn't be a problem if it were given to a great saint, or perhaps a normal person, but among all people, why was it given to a psychopath? Or perhaps the tower thought it was unchallengeable for anyone other than the Flame Emperor. Did one need to become like him to reach the top? But the MC wouldn't accept that. He would clear the 20th floor in place of the Flame Emperor, the 30th, the 50th, and even the 100th. He would show everyone that he wasn't wrong to kill him. At that moment, the MC leveled up to rank D. As he advanced towards the monsters, the Sword Saint moved alongside him and decapitated all the goblins in front of them. He said something to the MC, but it was unintelligible. However, he stopped and repeated himself, declaring that the attack had been fantastic. He stated his name was Marcus Callenberry. This was the second time a rank 1 hunter had told the MC their name. However, they were different names and different people. This is why he could now do what he could never have done in the past, proudly state his own name to people. Thus, the rank 1 hunter, Sword Saint, chief of the Egan Empire Knights, re-entered the battle. At that moment, more people arrived. They were the knights led by the Inquisitor, and another one of them joined the battle. But the MC noticed that everything around him was silent, and only one thought crossed his mind: to move forward. He was focused on the battle and nothing else. Even Viper, who was following him, noticed his complete concentration. Then, the only thing he said was that his name was Liao Fan, and he declared that he would protect the MC as he was the rising star. At that very moment, the Demon King began to speak, asking if they thought they had any time. The goddess was very weak, and now, who would they rely on? Perhaps their own existence, and if so, he wanted to see it with his own eyes. When he attacked, the Black Witch stepped forward and repelled his attacks with her mirror, diminishing their force, and Viper and the Sword Saint managed to stop the assault. At that moment, the Black Witch called out to the MC, asking him to take her hand. However, he remembered that everything happening would soon vanish, as people wouldn't recall anything that had occurred. Just because they wouldn't remember didn't mean things would disappear. This is how a person who died on the 1st floor and a spirit who died on the 99th floor managed to get there. When he returned, nothing would have been resolved. However, he would be a little stronger and also do things a little better. At that moment, they stood before the Demon King, who declared that he had made it clear there was a traitor among their group, yet they clung to the trust they had in each other as if stitching together scraps. However, scraps could not become a real dress. At that very moment, the MC released the Black Witch's hand and, in his thoughts, apologized. Perhaps they wouldn't remember the events that happened today, but it would be for a greater good. Well, now it was time for the second round. At this moment, the MC had another thought. Why would the tower, after giving such power to someone like Yu Suha, give such an opportunity to someone useless like him? Perhaps the tower was disappointed with the attitudes displayed by the hunters. Perhaps the Flame Emperor used his strength to clear the 10th floor, and perhaps the tower didn't consider that a disgrace. Each floor had a secret mission, and the 12th floor was certainly no exception. The Demon King had 3 abilities that caught the MC's attention, but he already knew which one he would take. The Ghost questioned if he was really going to take that one, and the MC replied that it would at least be useful until the 20th floor. The Ghost didn't understand, but the MC probably had a plan. Then the MC asked the Ghost if he could answer one thing, if he knew what the old man did every day. The Ghost replied yes, he plans the entire day, from the moment he wakes up until the moment he goes to sleep. The MC told him to explain his routine, as he would need it for something. After choosing the skill card, and now that he was rank D, he ended up seeing the Demon King's trauma. However, let's talk about that nightmare another time. The MC went back 24 hours in time, reliving everything again. Well, the 11th floor wouldn't be a problem, but on the 12th, where the Demon King appears, they would all have a fight. The Black Witch questioned if the MC was all right, as he seemed strange. However, he simply replied that he was a bit emotional after thinking about being with incredible people like them. Then he declared that he knew the situation of the 11th floor, and not only that, he also knew its mission. Hearing this, they asked if he could share that information with them. The MC said it was possible. However, there was a condition. There would be a moment when he would ask them for a favor, and they should listen to that request. He couldn't say what it was yet, and it wasn't anything that involved someone's life or asking for money, and if they thought it was an impossible request, then they were welcome to reject it. The Inquisitor was the first to agree to the condition, and the Countess said that from the moment he stated they could refuse the request, she accepted his terms. The MC, hearing their responses, saw that the first step was complete, and with that, the 11th floor just became a little easier to clear. At that moment, the MC caught the Paladin's attention and asked if she could take a walk with him, as he had something to ask her. It would be quick, 30 minutes at most. As they walked, everyone was talking about who cleared the 10th floor, but this was no longer important to the MC because the old man was following him. The Ghost told the MC not to look back, as the old man had an almost perfect stealth ability, so even if he looked, he wouldn't be able to see him. But there was one thing the MC realized in his last attempt. It would be too late to try and resolve things with the Sword Saint on the 12th floor. He needed to resolve this misunderstanding before continuing up the tower, because the Sword Saint had a really complicated relationship with the Guildmasters, and if he pointed his sword at the MC, he would automatically become an enemy of all Guildmasters, and adding a traitor to the mix. How would that turn out? The Paladin questioned the MC about where they were going, and he simply replied that he had a shop he wanted to show her. But, in reality, what the MC had been doing so far was provoking the Sword Saint. He had been deliberately luring him, using the information he had received from the Ghost, and the Sword Saint started following him as soon as he saw him. Of course, the Paladin knew nothing of this. The MC began talking about the shop he was taking her to, managed by an unknown but very skilled pharmacist, who would probably become famous in the future if she received some recognition. That's why he wanted her help with the business. She questioned if this was true, and the MC realized she had activated her ability. He simply said he was trying to get her help, and was sure that this was probably perceived as true by her ability. A little later, they arrived at the shop, and the girl asked who the person next to the MC was. He simply said she was the vice captain of the civil militia, or perhaps better known as the Paladin. The girl immediately became desperate, as the MC had brought someone very important to a humble shop like hers, and quickly knelt, thinking it was some kind of drug bust. She immediately declared that she had never once touched any kind of drug or created any harmful medicine. The Paladin had probably activated her ability again, and was certainly confused, because all of it was true. The MC approached the girl, telling her to calm down, as he was the one who had brought her there. The girl asked why he had done that, but the MC said that despite her being so talented, she had no work to do, and for that reason, he wanted to introduce her to the Paladin so she could give her some sample potions. Hearing these words, she became extremely happy, saying that the MC was an angel. However, at that very moment, another customer arrived, and the first thing thing the old man declared was that, with the exception of the MC, he would like both girls to leave, as he wished to have a private conversation with him. The paladin questioned if the Sword Saint wasn't being too aggressive. However, the Sword Saint told her to leave immediately. However, the paladin added that if he had lost his memory due to age, his reputation wasn't what it used to be. She also declared that the MC had just joined all 5 great guilds, and if she suffered any attack, it would be a declaration of war against them. She continued by saying that she had received several complaints about some human hunts the Sword Saint had carried out, and the civil militia hadn't had time to intervene in his personal execution of justice. However, the story changes if it happened right in front of her. The old man questioned if she really thought she could stop him, and she replied that she couldn't, but she would fight nonetheless, and would even die if it came to that. If she died by his hands, he would end up becoming the murderer who killed an innocent person. Well, this was a weakness MC Gongjia discovered in his past life. The Sword Saint was vulnerable to innocent people. That's why the MC brought the only guild leader who hadn't killed anyone, and by the Sword Saint's moral standards, the paladin's kill count almost made her a saint. There was also another person there, and with both of them present, it was like a cheat code. Because even though they lacked the strength to face the Sword Saint, good people like them were the only ones who could stop him. At that very moment, the Sword Saint sheathed his sword, and thus the second step was complete. Then, the MC called out to the Sword Saint, saying he wanted to meet him in the northern field. He would go alone, and if the old man wanted to know what kind of person he was, he should go there tomorrow. The girl asked the paladin if the Sword Saint was known as a demonic assassin, and she explained that it wasn't common knowledge. However, at least among the leaders of the 5 guilds, they knew something. Apparently, the Sword Saint had lost his daughter and son-in-law to a heinous assassin, but the details were unknown because the old man didn't talk much about it, and for that reason, he harbored anger against assassins. Well, the paladin realized she had lost the focus of the conversation and asked how much the potions there cost, because if they were too expensive, the civil militia wouldn't be able to afford them as they were on a tight budget. The very next day, people were eager for the opening of the 11th floor, and the atmosphere was similar to what happened in his past life, except for a few changes. The Sword Saint remarked that the MC had indeed gone alone, and questioned if he was confident enough to face him by himself, or if he was perhaps proud of his skills after committing so many murders. The ghost asked if Gongjia was alright, and he replied that his heart was beating a little fast. The MC told the Sword Saint that he knew why he so desperately wanted to kill him, stating that the reason was his skill, Detective's Eye. The old man questioned how he knew that, but the MC asked him to trust what he was about to say. Earning someone's trust was a very difficult task because everyone has their stubbornness, and the Sword Saint's was his skill. The MC was about to try and make the Sword Saint deny the very life he had lived. Now this was difficult, but he would have to bet his life on it. Then, the MC told the Sword Saint that he was in fact a prophet, or rather something similar to prophetism, and thanks to this he discovered that the Sword Saint possessed the skill Detective's Eye. If he hadn't said anything, the Sword Saint would try to kill him just as he finished asking why he deserved to die, and then the MC would tell him that, according to his skill, the number on his head was 4093. To prove this, the Sword Saint asked the MC to guess how many fingers he had on his hands, but Gongjia already knew he would do that, and, in fact, he had expected it. At that very moment, he killed himself, and returned 24 hours into the past. He said he would try to prove it to him, stating that guessing how many fingers he had on his hands wouldn't be difficult for a true prophet, therefore he should trust what he was saying, as killing him there would be child's play. However, without his help, completing the 12th floor would be impossible. However, the old man said that he probably had a mind-reading ability. The MC killed himself again, knowing that wasn't enough. He knew it wouldn't be easy to persuade anyone, especially an old man who had become a master of his craft, but it was alright, as he could test him as many times as he wanted. No matter how long it took, he would eventually persuade him, since his death was longer than his life. Then the MC arrived at his answer, saying that he didn't need the Sword Saint to spare him forever. He would need 5 days, and within those 5 days, the Sword Saint could observe him on his own and judge with his own eyes whether he deserved to die or not. It didn't seem like the Sword Saint believed his words, yet Gongjia had an ace up his sleeve. He said that the Sword Saint from a distant future told him that he would prove he was a true prophet. Then, the only thing he said was, Sword Emperor. He went on to say that he didn't know whose nickname it was, but his future self told him that he would only need to speak that name to him, and it would be enough. Once again, the Sword Saint questioned if he truly only wanted 5 days. If that was the case, he would pursue him for the next 5 days, observing him closely at all times, analyzing his words and behavior. After that, he would judge for himself whether the MC deserved to die or not. The MC thanked him from the bottom of his heart, and realized what he had achieved. He had made a deal with the guild leaders, and at least for now, the Sword Saint trusted him. Thus, he had met all the necessary conditions to prevent unnecessary deaths on the 12th floor. Upon arriving on the 12th floor, the beginning was the same as last time. However, something was different. All the leaders were more united, and as a result, their subordinates were more ready for battle than ever. The fight was proceeding efficiently and safely. The ghost asked the MC if he was okay with this, as he wouldn't even be noticed that way, adding that Gongjia was an attention seeker. If he kept standing still like that, he wouldn't get any attention. However, the MC replied that it wasn't bad either. Meanwhile, as the MC spoke with the ghost, someone was watching. Gongjia quickly turned around, asking what he was doing there, and the Sword Saint replied that he was observing, because, as he had said before, he would be watching him for the next 5 days. The MC questioned if he planned to watch him 24 hours a day, and the Sword Saint replied that was his intention. Just as the MC was about to say that if he didn't join the battle, he wouldn't get any contributions, the Sword Saint instantly killed monsters and stated that he wouldn't forget to wield his sword. When the MC tried to approach the Black Witch, her subordinate stopped him. The Black Witch said she was a bit busy and asked if he could summarize everything he wanted to say in 30 seconds. The MC said that the reward he had earned on the 10th floor was a minimap that could show both allies and enemies across the battlefield. She quickly approached him, saying he should have mentioned that sooner, and asked where the boss was, as they were running out of time. She asked him to verbally consent to use his teleport ability directly to the boss, and thus, they arrived at the front line. With the second teleport, he was already on top of the boss. The MC leaped towards it and split it in half. From then on, everything happened the same way as in the previous cycle. The goblins began to retreat, and the hunters killed them. However, one thing changed. The Black Witch was absolutely delighted, as they had managed to defeat the boss quickly, and probably fewer than 30 people had died. Seeing this, the MC was shocked. Perhaps the reason she seemed so sensitive in the last cycle was because many hunters had died at the beginning, and now she was celebrating because the deaths were few. Gongjia noted that she was a very straightforward person, as she became happy or sad depending on the number of people who died. The MC told her to relax, as she was too excited, but she replied that no previous floor had been cleared with so few deaths. That's why she was proud of it. She added that he could have simply monopolized the reward from the previous floor, and if he hadn't shared the information, many deaths could have occurred. That's why she was happy that someone like him would be a new hero. The MC noted that being idolized or envied by normal people was great, but it was nothing compared to receiving recognition from those people. In his mind, perhaps they couldn't claim to be the best, but they were the ones who had the the right to say they tried their hardest. The Sword Saint and the Black Dragon Master were undeniable, people who were giving their all in their lives. He wanted to live a life where he was recognized by these people and wanted to protect them. The MC didn't want them to fall into the Demon King's clutches, and for that reason, he wouldn't disrespect these people who worked so hard, as the Flame Emperor did. He wouldn't stand by just watching or using deceptive schemes. He wanted to recognize them and be sincerely recognized by them. Even if it was an impossible dream, that's how he wanted to live. At the same moment, the Black Witch concluded that if they continued this way, clearing the 20th floor would be very easy, as she had predicted they would lose at least 5,000 people on that floor. However, these thoughts were wrong, because if the MC left them alone, they would suffer a great loss on the 12th floor. More specifically, they would lose the only person capable of communicating with the outside world, and if that happened, they would lose 50,000 people, or even 500,000. That's why the MC would carry them. When the Inquisitor began to approach, Gongjia asked them to wait a moment and declared that he had something to say to everyone. When he said this, the Sword Saint was merely observing, and obviously the MC was happy about that. He reminded them about the promise he had made with them and was now asking them to listen to his request. He asked for 5 days. They should do absolutely nothing for exactly 5 days, and if they did, he promised to clear all floors from the 11th to the 20th within 5 days. The Black Witch questioned the MC. What do you mean wait 5 days? The MC said that was exactly what she had heard, but she stated that it was impossible and added that they hadn't really taken long to clear the 11th floor. He had also cleared the 10th floor alone, but wasn't he being too overconfident? But the MC pleaded and said that he had indeed cleared the 10th floor alone, yet he had shared the rewards and benefits he had received from information about the 11th floor to the boss's location. This was a benefit not only for him but for everyone. Because of this, he earned the right to ask for a favor. The favor he was asking was for them to wait 5 days, regardless of whether he would clear the 20th floor or not. That was the only thing he asked of them. Meanwhile, the MC was in an internal struggle between himself and the Demon King, as he realized the boss was somewhat desperate because the hunters weren't fighting among themselves. The Demon King kept insisting that he wanted to give the MC a reward, and if he didn't want it, he could refuse. However, the Inquisitor stated that it was a very simple problem, as the MC had shared information on how to clear the 11th floor, and the only thing he asked in return was for them to listen to his requests and agree to them, as long as it wasn't impossible. Staying there for 5 days doing nothing wasn't that simple, considering the media would cause an uproar, but it was definitely not an impossible request. For that reason, he approved. The Black Witch said it truly wasn't impossible, and the Inquisitor added that a promise was a promise, so they should keep it. The Black Witch conceded, and after that, the other leaders also agreed. Now, as for the Sword Saint, he said he had never agreed to that promise, and the only promise he had to the MC was to watch over him for the next 5 days. Therefore, he had no reason to listen to his requests. So, if he was heading to the 20th floor, he would follow him as he had promised. The MC intended to kill the Demon King, but it wouldn't be a problem if the old man was by his side. Then the MC bid farewell to everyone and said he would see them in 5 days. However, when he opened the gate, he realized that everyone around him was frozen. The MC thought the reason was because he hadn't accepted the quest yet, or rather, he hadn't chosen a position. For example, on the 11th floor, they received the quest as soon as they entered, so that should be the normal quest progression. But they had been in limbo for moments at the beginning of the 12th floor, and why on earth did it take an eternity until they received the reward and the quest? Well, the quest only began once everyone chose their positions, which meant that if they didn't choose them, the quest wouldn't start. As a consequence, the demonic army's invasion wouldn't happen, and the Empire's army wouldn't be against them either. Now, hypothetically, what would happen if the Demon King died in that state? More precisely, what would happen if the MC killed the boss even before the quest began? Simple. No one could choose the Demon King's reward. Thus, there would be no traitor, and the Demon King would be destroyed before he could do anything. Shortly after that, the Demon King appeared and asked the MC how he had such audacity, as he should follow the steps correctly and choose a side he wanted to defend. However, the MC had already made a decision. He wanted to kill him even before the quest started. Thus, no hunter or Empire citizen would die. In other words, that was a happy ending without any sacrifice. At that moment, the Demon King grew even more furious, asking if the MC truly believed he could stop him alone, without the help of the goddess or the Empire. However, the MC didn't need help, because in a frozen world, raising his sword like the hands of a clock, the 5 days he had mentioned would stretch into eternity. Now for the curious among you, let's delve a bit into the Demon King's trauma. It was a rainy day when it first opened its eyes, and the first thing it did was attack a simple frog and take its body for itself. The rain fell that day, but that entity simply wanted to live a little longer. But let's return to the battle, my little grasshoppers. Gongjia ended up being killed, so he marked his hand with every death that occurred. The ghost declared that the Demon King's sword skills were nothing special. He merely swung his sword forcefully back and forth. This meant the MC could dodge the attack as long as he knew its trajectory, but he was still too weak. The MC was trapped in a temporal prison. Even if he managed to dodge the first attack in the next cycle, he would inevitably die from the subsequent one. The MC began to wonder, if he had progressed through the mission normally, how many soldiers would have died on the chaotic battlefield? For every soldier who died, at least 20 years of life would be unlived and lost. When 10 of them died, that was 200 years. When 100 died, 2,000 years. To reclaim all that lost time, the MC decided not to choose any position. To complete this mission, he had to prepare himself to be trapped in eternity. For some, that might be extremely exhausting and perhaps even considered hell. But as the MC said, a hero must kill a Demon King. And now that he had become a hero, that was his job. He told the Demon King that he was the Empire's sword, and the MC's sword could be considered a clock hand. For to grant that world another second, he had to brandish it once more. He was simply a sword gaining another second. Yet the world trapped him in its 1 second for him to live once more. For the tides to rise and touch the heavens, it was necessary to start with a single drop. For him to live in an eternity, he would have to live each second at a time, and so he would live his life his own way. Gradually, results began to show. In one cycle, 40 people had died. In another, fewer than 30, and even as few as 20. The MC was happy that his struggle against eternity was yielding results, so much so that the Demon King himself asked why he was smiling. To the Demon King, the MC was simply a madman who would soon die. However, he stated that no one would understand him, but despite that, Gongjia never gave up, and indeed, had no reason to, because his sword today was faster than yesterday, and would become even faster than tomorrow. And why? Because he was alive. Then, the day arrived when no one died, and with it, his desire to live a little longer grew. However, this battle against the Demon King was not yet over. He could dodge most attacks, but there was always the strongest one. This time, however, he would give his utmost to defend against it. At that very moment, the sound of shattering glass was heard, and the Demon King's attack ceased. The Black Witch approached the MC and said she was too impatient to stand by waiting for him for 5 days, which was why she followed him to see what he would do. The MC replied that he was playing hero and was having a very good feeling. The Black Witch remarked that it was indeed a good feeling, as the most delicious malicious prey is always the stolen one. The Demon King stated that they were truly confident, and the MC apologized, as he had said he would face him alone. But upon reflecting on tradition, heroes always team up to defeat the villain, so he was merely following tradition. At that very moment, the Demon King activated his subunit, and numerous monsters began to resurface. The Black Witch asked the Sword Saint to help them, as he had been standing there watching them battle, but they probably wouldn't be able to defeat so many monsters, so they should get out of there. However, the MC said that everything was fine, and at that very instant, he activated the Demon King's very same ability. Let's go back a bit to the Demon King's trauma. He was growing larger and larger, and each time he gained a new body, he also gained a new joy, the joy of slaughter. Obviously, he went after the girl with an incessant bloodlust, wondering where that aroma, that scent, was coming from. Every time he devoured his prey, it was as if he had possessed them. He swallowed them whole, even their memories, and they seemed to become his own. At that very moment, the girl's father arrived, calling her name Stelly, telling her she shouldn't be running around because her body was weak, and the doctor had said she was sick and shouldn't go out. However, the girl said she thought she was cured. That was the Demon King's first name. Turning back to the MC, he had activated his skill, and several skeletons began to appear. The MC began to explain that, at first, when he died to the Demon King, other skills he possessed caught his attention. For example, a technique to strengthen his aura would be great, or if he could summon lightning like the Demon King. But after thinking for a bit, he realized it had to be a little different. A skill that summons those he had killed as monsters. Now comes the question, how many people has the MC killed? The ghost began to say that, counting the Flame Emperor and himself, it would be 2. Well, that would be a good thought. However, why does the Sword Saint's kill count show as if he had killed 4,000 people? In other words, there's another way to calculate the number of kills in the tower, and now knowing that, how many people do you think the MC has killed? Or rather, those skulls standing before him were actually him. The Black Witch was surprised by the MC's skill, and said she understood why he had cleared the 10th floor alone, and asked them for that favor. However, the one most surprised by the situation was the Demon King, as he was seeing his own skill used against himself. The MC stated he wasn't keen on explaining how he achieved this. Hearing these words, the Demon King became furious. At that very moment, the MC called the Sword Saint's attention, and told him he should fight alongside the skeletons, because that way, they wouldn't lose. With the Black Witch's help, she could stop his attacks, even if only for an instant. Then the MC ordered his skeletons to advance, and he was engaged in a fierce battle. It could be considered a battle of death because apart from the Demon King, the Sword Saint, the MC, and the Black Witch, everyone there was already dead, even if they lost their heads in battle. Seeing such a scene, the Demon King began to question how this was possible. A person from another world was using the same skill as him, and being another person who hadn't lived there and had no malicious intent of hatred for that world, why did he intend to block his path? However, the MC said it didn't matter where he came from, but the most important thing now was that he was there. Even if he didn't think that was enough qualification, the boss shouldn't mess with him, because the tower recognized his qualifications. From now on, his nickname would be the King of Death. And here we are again to understand a little more about this Demon King. He didn't age, and his beauty was maintained day after day. An intoxicating aroma emanated from her body, leaving people intoxicated. They began to call her the Saint of the Frontier, and said she was capable of curing any disease. People had complete faith in her, and were desperate to receive her blessing. Of course, people trusted her words, but even living for a long time within a human body, she was still attracted by the pleasant scent of human beings. Even if it was just a baby wrapped in rags, it smelled very good to her. Happiness was a joy in that world. As she swallowed the baby's flesh and bones, she received the child's memories. Of course, to her, she was saving the children. And the worst part was that even the parents themselves weren't understanding what was happening, and thanked her from the bottom of their hearts. Or rather, they thanked the Saint of the Frontier. Many people said she performed miracles and was the savior of the sick and their true deliverer. However, this began to lead to something. Farmers and agricultural workers from other lands, who were constantly abused, ended up fleeing to the frontiers in search of the Saint of Salvation. These nobles sent all their soldiers, claiming she was a witch who was taking their men, and therefore, they would burn her village. Seeing everything before her eyes, she was shocked. The soldiers were killing everyone she had saved. At that instant, she declared that humans who failed to see each other as humans deserved to be consumed by their own evil. Returning to the battle, the MC still couldn't dodge the final attack. He always died to it. The MC's time reversal clock ability specified that the user retained their memories and skills when going back in time, and these skills were also part of what was preserved. This is why the Sword Emperor, or Ghost, was able to share his memories with the MC even after returning in time. This was because abilities were maintained exactly as they were at the moment of death, so even cooldowns were preserved. He spent day after day reviving and dying, constantly fighting the same monsters. Every time he reached the Demon King's final attack, the MC almost died. But this time, having already died more than 7 times, he managed to activate his 100 Ghost ability again, giving him a slight advantage in battle. However, even if the MC attacked directly, the Demon King was incredibly resilient. The Ghost said the MC was truly impressive, as he could repeat the summoning as many times as he wished. So he told the MC to hide somewhere for a week and then kill himself to return in time again. He added that since the MC had several skeleton monsters considered zombies, instead of being called the King of Death, he was more like the Zombie King. After all that talk, the MC ended up dying, and there he was again, facing the Demon King. But in this cycle, the Black Witch activated her strongest ability and attacked the Demon King with all her might. Of course, it caused significant damage. However, the battle wasn't over yet, and since the MC knew the Demon King's movements, he was commanding both the Sword Saint and the Black Witch. The battle was unfolding perfectly and safely, almost like a premonition. Once again, the Demon King received a full force attack at point-blank range. However, this attack revealed a bit of human skin, and the boss felt endangered. So the Demon King decided to retreat, and of course, seeing that was disappointing. The MC was in shock because after so many deaths, the only thing he managed to do was make him retreat. However, the system created a secret quest, and it wasn't just one. It had recreated all quests from the 11th floor to the 20th. The secret quest the MC had received was called Warrior of the Still World, and its objective was simple. He would have to create a world without any victims. These people wouldn't know what he did, so he wouldn't receive recognition from those he saved. The system asked if he wanted to accept that quest. Since everything aligned for him, he obviously accepted. The system began searching for the Demon King's existence on the 12th floor, but he was no longer there. This caused an alteration in the timeline. That was the first time the MC had seen something like that, and even the Ghost replied that he had never witnessed it either. However, looking back, they noticed the castle walls had changed, as the Empire's flags were gone. To get a better look, they went to the castle walls. The city, which had been shrouded in chaos and morbidity, suddenly seemed to burst with life. Then the MC understood what that timeline alteration meant. It meant history had changed. If originally the Empire had been attacked by the Demon King, and whether they won or lost, the fact that they had been attacked didn't matter. In this world, the Demon King's attack itself ceased to exist. exist, without anyone knowing, while no one was paying attention. History had changed because of the MC. The city that once had blood like rain was now illuminated by the joyful sunrise. Of course, this was incredibly gratifying. At that very moment, someone shouted, asking what the MC and the Black Witch were doing up there, questioning if they were enemies. The person shouting was the same general who had received the MC on the 11th floor. The MC stated that he knew him and his name, yet the general didn't recognize the MC, so the fact that he was shouting at him as if speaking to a stranger meant he remembered nothing of what had happened. At that very moment, the MC began to laugh. He laughed loudly, like a psychopath. Then he infused his voice with aura and declared that he had protected the Empire and kept his promise without any shame. For hundreds of days, MC held the conviction that he didn't want to see any victims, and after hundreds of days, he had finally defeated the Demon King and was proud of it. In the past, he lived like trash, envied others, laughed at them all, and spent his days drinking to seem cool. However, he froze those emotions and gave up on his life. But today, he could stand confidently in front of the Black Witch, the Sword Saint, and even the entire world. Above all, he was proud of himself because he had fulfilled the promise he made. At that moment, the MC shouted to the general, telling him to take good care of the Empire and that from now on, he should protect it alone. The ghost, seeing the MC shouting as if he were crazy, couldn't stop laughing. The MC told him to be quiet because today was his day. Then he told the Black Witch that it was time to ascend to the 13th floor, but she looked at him with contempt and said that truly none of the best hunters were normal. As they were about to teleport, the Sword Saint stated that the first entry was always guaranteed to the rank 1, so the MC could command the transfer for all of them. Of course, that was an honor for the MC. Upon arriving on the 13th floor, the Demon King was already waiting for them, and the MC prepared for battle. However, the ghost noticed something was wrong. It seemed the Demon King was weaker than before. Because he had suffered that blow from the witch, he was obviously injured, but it wasn't a physical injury. It was almost as if his level had dropped. Compared to when he was on the 12th floor, he was like an SSS rank Goblin King, but now he seemed like a common Goblin King who had lost his SSS rank. His strength was similar to that of the Goblin King the MC faced on the 5th floor. This was strange, because normally bosses get progressively stronger as you ascend the tower. Did the Black Witch's attack have some leveled decreasing effect? At that moment, the tower tried to calculate the rewards for completing the 12th floor, but the system errored. The rewards would be delivered when the MC reached the 19th floor. For now, he would receive the smallest of the rewards. All maps from the 11th to the 20th floor would be opened. In short, it was a world map. Seeing that, the MC understood why the Demon King was acting so strangely, because the history of the Demon King's attack from the previous floor had vanished, and even things like shelters and refugees had completely disappeared. Following this line of thought, where would the refugees come from? Had they come from the Empire, or perhaps from the entire continent? The shelters and refugees where these people had stayed completely vanished. As a consequence, it wasn't just the Empire's history that had changed, but that of the entire continent. For those who didn't understand what the MC had said, it was essentially that he had returned to the time before the Demon King's attacks. The MC explained to the ghost that his level had indeed decreased. He explained that there were voices hunters heard when they leveled up, which meant the hunter was growing, but for the phrase existence was more defined. It wasn't just to make things sound prettier. Perhaps the Demon King was a monster who had evolved by killing many people, but his murders and hunts had turned into nothing. Thus, his evolution was erased. That's why that moment was the best for a counterattack. Suddenly, the Demon King was summoning his soldiers. The Sword Saint and the Black Witch, along with the MC, were fighting against them. At that instant, the MC said he wanted to make a bet with the ghost, asking him how many times he thought the MC would die before reaching the 19th floor. The ghost said it would take at least 100 deaths, and the MC said he would choose 99. The ghost said that was unfair, so if he wanted to win the bet, he wouldn't help him anymore. After he defined that, let the games begin. In the first cycle, the MC asked if the Black Witch could do anything else against the zombies, and she said she was doing her best because she was the only one with area damage, and asked if the MC couldn't use his monster summoning ability like last time. However, he replied that he still needed 3 coins to use his ability. She didn't quite understand. The MC asked the Sword Saint to open the sarcophagus ahead, as there was something inside. The Sword Saint questioned why he should do that, but the MC simply said he was a prophet, so he should believe him. However, when the Sword Saint opened it, the MC ended up dying. In the next cycle, he asked him to retrieve the axe from inside the sarcophagus, but the Sword Saint retorted, saying he had used a sword his entire life and shouldn't use another weapon. But the MC explained that the axe had a special area of effect ability that could quickly eliminate the zombies. Just as the MC was about to say that he needed to believe what he said, he died again. In yet another cycle, the zombies were no longer a problem. However, a new monster emerged, a giant, one-eyed zombie. The Sword Saint declared he would quickly finish it off, but he ended up dying. Again, in the next cycle, the Sword Saint said the same thing. However, the MC stopped him and asked the Black Witch to aim for the giant eye right in the middle of its face. She immediately got excited, eager to burst it, but at that very moment, they died. In the subsequent cycle, the MC could activate his ability again and declared he would deal with the giant monster with his army of the dead. However, he asked something of the Black Witch. She couldn't aim for its eye. She was shocked, as the giant's eye seemed to be practically begging to be shot. It was almost like a glowing target ready to be hit. She wanted to say something more, but the Sword Saint told her to follow his orders, since the MC claimed to be a prophet, so the Black Witch declared she would hold back as much as possible to avoid hitting that eye. Shortly after, they defeated the giant zombie, causing the Demon King to retreat to the 14th floor. Just like before, the story began to change. Now it was time to clear the upper floors, and to avoid the tedious hit and rewind loop, they did the same things floor by floor, 15th, 16th, 17th, and thus, the Demon King's story was regressing. It reached a point where he could barely be considered a Demon King. Then the MC approached him, saying he could finally see his eyes because, after so long, he could truly see deep within him. The Demon King and the warrior fighting him couldn't make eye contact before a tragedy. Therefore, this time, he should fight with all his might. If he ran away again, how much weaker would he become next time? With all the strength he now possessed, the Demon King wouldn't be able to win. The Demon King began to question what he was talking about, as he knew nothing of what had happened. At that very moment, the MC called him by his first name, which was Stelly. The MC had warned him that he should fight with everything he had, otherwise his time would be longer than his story. Well, let's finally conclude what the Demon King's trauma was about. People screamed that they had to burn the witch's nest, and everyone she had cared for would be treated as cursed monsters. For that reason, no one would leave alive. And why now? Because humans were burning each other. They said their majesties had ordered them killed. Had they sought an excuse to kill people? Even beings of other races supported this. But who were they? What gave them the right to burn other people? What had they done? They only wanted to care for their children and families and live a peaceful life. All those people who had treated her kindly were killed in the process. Those sick people who received her help were not spared. Why on earth did this happen? At that very moment, Stelly began to eat their ashes. Then she began to declare that they were all born as humans and knew the beauty of life. Why, even knowing the pain of shedding a tear, did they still do do that. Seeing such a situation, how could she not call humans monsters? Just because of their judgment, they would be human, while those she saved would be considered monsters. Were they the only ones who deserved to live in that world? If that were the case, they should prove it to her. She cursed them all, because their wickedness made her this way. Thus, the rain fell so that no more villages could ever be burned. At that moment, the ghost tells the MC to wake up because this isn't his hell. Returning to the battle on the 19th floor, the MC was continuously fighting against the Demon King, forcing him to retreat. His body was getting smaller and smaller, the water clinging to him was separating, and even blood was starting to seep out. Then the MC tells him to retreat. He should return to the 20th floor to his base, which was the Demon King's castle, as this was his destiny. Since the Demon King couldn't dispute this, he retreated, and thus the battle on the 19th floor ended. The MC humbly asks them if he could personally finish off the Demon King. The Black Witch agrees, as she had broken her promise to wait 5 days. The Sword Saint also agrees, as it had been 5 days since he started observing him. Once he completed the 20th floor, he should meet him. The MC thanked both of them and went to the 20th floor. Upon arriving, there was only a small body in front of him. At that moment, the system was calculating the reward Gongjia would receive, and his powers were being readjusted. As a reward, he received the limited powers of an apostle. With this, he could strengthen any of his abilities that were not rank X. It was unknown why or who built the tower. However, now the MC could try to guess what kind of entity the tower was. It was like a guardian of his decisions, making the MC remember the choice he had made. Then he declares to the Demon King that her end had come, but she says that village was hers, and he shouldn't dare destroy her paradise. In her mind, she still remembered those burn marks and all those flames. She questions if the MC was going there to burn her paradise. This was the lowest stage of the world with the weakest boss of all. The MC didn't even bother to dodge her attacks. The situation had now changed. On the 12th floor, the Demon King attacked while the MC defended, but now who was attacking and who was defending was completely reversed. The Demon King tells the MC to die, but he says that word held no meaning for someone like him. At that moment, he splits the Demon King in half and continues attacking, saying that she had become increasingly weaker, and with each attack, the Demon King lost her power until a point where her title was stripped away. Thus, she reverted to being a normal human. The MC says she had indeed become much weaker, and she asks him not to approach, but Gongjia simply says that if she didn't want him to approach, she should use a blade, not her words. Otherwise, he would keep coming towards her. Suddenly, she declares that she deserved to do everything she did. However, the MC responds that she was wrong, and as he had said before, the MC was a foreigner from another world. The king, the emperor, and the military forces had united to burn her village, and none on that continent were free from that responsibility. But the MC was not responsible for it. He was a complete outsider. As a hunter, he was free from that responsibility. Now she was saying she had done nothing wrong. Estelle was probably as scared as she was. She screamed for her father and asked for help. And what did he do to a child like her? He swallowed her and pretended to be a savior to everyone, which is why people trusted her. She had hidden the truth, swallowed a child, and taken Estelle's form, remaining silent because she would feel misunderstood and was afraid of being treated as a monster. However, she screams that she didn't know, saying she had no memory or knowledge of humans and therefore didn't understand what that meant. The MC asks if she was saying she did it because she didn't know, and she confirms it, because if she had known, she would never have done it. But the MC says that this is how humans acted. The king she killed when she was the Demon King should have given her the same excuse. Of course, some of them probably lied to try and get away with it. And how could she be sure that all of them were the same? Did the soldiers really go on their own to attack the village? And couldn't the people who had left after losing their territory use the same "I didn't know" excuse? In this world, the only justice the MC knew was retribution. And if he believed that the things she swallowed and then expelled were still human, to be fair to them, she should go through the same thing he did. At that very moment, the MC claimed his reward. He already knew which skill he wanted to evolve. He could evolve an SS rank skill to SSS rank, but the MC didn't want to evolve the skill. He wanted to alter it. He only wanted to change one part, that the dead he revived would not inherit their memories and previous lives. That's why he wanted the summoned beings to be able to retain memories only when he wished. This was a reasonable request, as he wasn't asking for a cooldown reduction or anything like that. The tower accepted these conditions. After that, it was time to kill the Demon King. If she didn't like the word kill, she should just think that the MC was swallowing her as she did with others. Just as she did with Estelle and the other sick people, he would save her in the same way she saved others. The MC was relieved that she was still human, because if not, how could she use her ghost summoning skill? Then she tried to attack the MC, but he easily dodged. The ghost said her posture was all clumsy. She was simply running while swinging her sword and not even looking forward, which couldn't even be considered swordsmanship. That's why the MC should end this quickly. Then the Demon King fell to her knees, and the MC recalled what the Demon King had said, that he who sows death will, in the end, meet death. However, as Gongjia was about to deliver the final blow, the ghost stopped him and said he shouldn't kill her now, as it seemed he was too certain. Let's say the MC was certain that she was no longer a monster and was now human like him. However, since she was an NPC, could she be summoned by his skill? And if the tower didn't consider her human and he had killed her, could he live with that weight on his conscience? But the MC declared that NPCs were people too. However, the ghost said that perhaps that wasn't how the tower thought. So the MC called out to the tower and asked if his skill could be used on NPCs or if it only considered hunters like him. However, his question was rejected, and this matter was beyond the tower's authority. It recognized his question as an official matter, and therefore, the tower would request a higher conference with the 6 constellations of the 10,000 lives. With the 6 constellations of the 10,000 lives, the MC questions what this is, not knowing what is happening, as he was apparently taken to the director's chamber. "You're asking too many questions, my friend. You're asking too many questions. This will end badly." And then, several butterflies begin to surround him, and he opens his eyes, seeing where he is, and remembers that it is the same ability selection room. So he asks why him, and the system confirms the participants. The constellation, author of all operas, is participating, along with the lady who walks in the mirage, the moon who contemplates blindness, and the one who created legislations. Gongjia thinks he can't see anything, but he can feel something, and the god who dances from the void also appears. He notices oppressive presences there, and the tower confirms that the 6 constellations of 10,000 lives are participating, and the issue of the tower's temporary apostle, the King of Death, is being presented. The tower asks if the 100 Ghost reincarnation ability applies to NPCs. If they agree that the ability applies, they must confirm, and if they disagree, they must decline. And then all those constellations begin to converse among themselves in their own language, and the MC, seeing this, begins to panic. And with that, they reach a consensus, and Gongjia remembers that the languages of all beings in the tower are translated so he can understand, but they are different. They are not beings of the tower. They are beings that cannot even be compared to the Demon King. They might even be the beings who created that tower. And then the tower states that the vote on the issue at hand is beginning, and the 6th constellation constellation the author of all operas votes against. The fifth and fourth vote in favor, the third votes against the MC, and the second simply abstains. And so there are 2 votes against and 2 in favor and 1 abstention. The beings who have the authority to decide on his reincarnation ability end up not reaching a conclusion after the vote, and he questions why, until he realizes that one of them has not yet voted, a being who didn't need to come there because he was already there from the beginning, the being who knew everything, the Tower Master. And Gongja says he thinks voting in favor is the right thing to do, because if NPCs are not included in the ability, then how did the Demon King manage to summon so many monsters? And all the people of the Empire killed by the Demon King were NPCs. And of course he knows they are worried. They are worried that he will start killing NPCs randomly to use them as pets, but he is sure that he has more than sufficiently demonstrated the kind of person he is, and he is not the type of person who would do that, and he says he will not live that way in the future. And so the Tower says he did quite well, but also says it's complicated, telling the King of Death to speak from his heart and not his head. And with that, he says that the Demon King was prey he caught, and he is his, so they should not dare lay a finger on him. And with that, the first constellation, Master of 1,000 Lives, votes in favor, and the vote concludes with 3 votes in favor and 2 against, along with 1 abstention. NPCs are included in the King of Death's reincarnation ability, and the King of Death's temporary apostle authority is removed. The conference concludes with the Tower once again wishing him good fortune. Then, when he returns, the Emperor is calling out to him incessantly, asking if he's hurt, questioning why he doesn't ask the Tower that. Then he calls out to him again, asking if he's listening, and the MC says it seems like he just blinked his eyes, but at the same time it feels like an eternity passed. And so he speaks to the Sword Emperor, asking if he saw or heard anything, and says that the Tower summoned him to the Void World, so there was something about the 10,000 lives or a constellation he doesn't quite know. Saying that, then a being like the Tower Master appeared and laughed, asking if he knows nothing, and the Emperor apparently doesn't know what's going on, apologizing and saying he thinks he provoked the MC too much, turning him into a zombie. He promises to provoke him with moderation from now on, telling him to go back to being his usual self. Gongja is surprised that the Emperor doesn't know, and even the legend who reached the 99th floor of the Otherworld's tower is unaware of this. He questions who he just met, but then thinks he needs to stay calm, because even though he still doesn't know many things, he is now certain of some. Meanwhile, Stelly continues to ask him to wait, and the MC says that he will now deliver the final blow to his prey. Once he reaches the 100th floor, he will know everything else. The Emperor then asks if he will really kill her, questioning if it wouldn't be better to ask the Tower first, but Gongja says it's fine, because he has already found his answer, and so, he uses the 100 ghosts, commanding her to awaken, and she rises from the ground, returning to his command. He orders that thing to stand up, and says that its appearance is the same as before, but it is nothing more than a newborn being. Those who gave birth to life in that world always bore the responsibilities. He states that Stelly is merely a name she stole, not a name she is entitled to have. He says that the first of these responsibilities was to give her a name, so he names her Kuro, declaring that from now on, this will be her name, commanding her to serve him as her new master. And she was the being who was once Stelly, the saint of the frontier, and the Autumn Rain Demon King. The one who deserved no name finally gained her own. And so Kuro accepts his orders, stating that she will obey all of them. Finally, the final day of the 5-day promise comes to an end, and one of the kings has fallen. The Emperor then says he doesn't understand, telling the MC to think about what he did to her, wondering if he should be angry with him. He also questions why she decided to bow her head without saying a word. And regarding another matter, if he wants to know why Kuro decided to obey him without hesitation, the MC says it's because she knows, and he adds that the Emperor will also know very soon. And so the Tower begins to search for the Demon King's existence on the 20th floor, but he is not found. The confirmed absence of the Demon King and the alteration of the timeline occur there, and at this, she begins to cry, seeing that everyone has returned to life. But that same commander appears there with all his troops, ordering them to stop right in front of the village. And so the Demon King falls to the ground, calling out to the MC, saying that he will hold no grudge and will not seek revenge. He states that he will do anything the MC asks, saying he cares about nothing else, but pleads with him to please save his village. The Emperor then finally realizes that this is what it means for a master to also be responsible for protecting their subjects, so he apologizes for misunderstanding. But Gongja says that the Emperor also lost the bet, telling him to think of it as a consequence. Then General Sarbaste orders his troops to stop there, asking who dares to block his path. The MC replies that he is actually the one who wants to ask, questioning what they came to do in a place like this. Sarbaste states that it is the will of His Majesty, the Emperor, and he heard that a witch has been harming the good citizens of this part of the continent. Even some monsters fell into the witch's trap and succumbed to darkness, so how could they stand idly by? But Gongja questions, so what? Sarbaste then says that everything will be purified with sacred fire, and the MC states that he knows who these people are. Then another man says that His Holiness ordered them to punish the heretics who dared to use a saint's name in vain, and the Lord of the Forest requested their presence, and the jewel was given to them by the Sage of the Mermaids. Gongja then realizes that these are the Temple Paladins, saved on the 13th floor, along with the Forest Elves, saved on the 14th floor, and the Waterfall Mages, saved on the 15th floor, along with the Volcano Warriors, saved on the 16th floor, and the Armed Merchant Company from the 17th floor, and the Nomads from the 18th, along with the soldiers from small countries from the 19th. All the people he saved are here now, Sarbaste asks again, demanding to know who dares interfere with his mission. The MC recalls the secret mission of the hero from his frozen world, thinking of those heroes, as it was said that the continent's humans wouldn't notice their justice and devotion, but justice is still justice, and devotion is still devotion. The mission asked if he would choose to continue being a hero, even in a frozen world. The MC speaks to General Sarbaste, asking if he just said he came due to an imperial decree, but Sarbaste doesn't like the way Gongja speaks to him at all. After all, he is acting under an imperial decree. But the MC then states that Sarbaste is a ridiculous person, because he clings to the imperial mandate, presuming no one else would understand the Emperor's decreed situation as well as he does. Sarbaste says he doesn't know what the boy is talking about, questioning how he dares to say something so insolent, and asks if he was sent by the witch who lives there. However, Gongja says that Sarbaste is a person who wants to defeat the already decided first prince to make the third prince ascend to the highest position. And as for insolence, Sarbaste can indeed call him insolent, but the MC says that's what he discovered when he saw the general's trauma. Sarbaste doesn't know this, but the MC still has a lot of information, and he says Sarbaste shouldn't live like this, telling him to think of all the grace His Majesty granted him, and the possibility of someone who would likely spend his entire life pulling nets at the port becoming an imperial guard, and then a general. Then tells him to see with his own eyes, raising that sword shining in front of everyone. The MC says that the emissary sent by the powerful founder Liafanta Agim stands before all of them. The MC speaks to Sarbaste, saying that he is aware of the chaos in the imperial family, recognizes the evil conduct of the terrible first prince, and also knows that Sarbaste Sarbaste sided with the third prince purely out of loyalty to the Empire, and the reason he said Sarbaste had gone mad with power was merely to test his nature. The MC asks if Sarbaste was saddened by this. Sarbaste questions how he could have been sad, as he did all this to test his loyalty, but he says he was a fool and couldn't overcome his anticipation, asking how he could commit such a sin. The MC continues to string along the NPC, saying there's nothing to be sad about in this, asking why he is still looking down while the MC stares at him from atop his horse. Sarbaste then jumps down, kneeling in front of Gongja, saying he is deeply honored. Everyone there begins to bow to the MC, hailing the founder's emissary, and all of them idolize Gongja. Then the Emperor says he thought the MC was only good at talking nonsense, and apparently, he also has a talent for lies. The MC questions if he only realized that now. Then the MC says he will give him some advice, because when he is using his sword, it's not just his true skills that matter. Faith, trust, and self-confidence are particularly important, and it's the same as lying. If he wants to deceive his opponent, he needs to deceive himself first, telling him to remember that, because a good liar is a very confident person. And while Gongja is showing that sword, the people of the Empire are mesmerized, but the others are somewhat skeptical, and the MC thinks that, as expected, the Holy Sword's effect is limited to the Egan Empire. At this, Sarbaste continues speaking to the MC, with polished respect, asking if he may ask a question, and Gongja tells him to go ahead. Sarbaste says they came there to subdue the witch, but questions how the emissary ended up there, and the MC thinks he must remember, because a good liar is a very confident person. He then tells the men that he has already defeated the witch, telling them to look, and they see Estelle. They note that she is the witch of the frontier, saying they've seen that woman before, and she is definitely the witch, ordering her to be burned. Gongja tells Kuro to come to him, instructing her to kneel before those people. She actually walks over and does as the MC says, telling her to lower her head and put her hands on the ground, placing her forehead there, and so she prostrates herself, even against her will. Gongja then tells her to push off with her feet and do a front flip. She doesn't understand at all, but he asks if she didn't hear him, and she says she did hear, doing exactly as the MC says. So he now tells her to do jumping jacks, and she doesn't like it at all, but she actually does what he asks. He continues making a lot of ridiculous requests to Kuro, telling her to spread her arms wide and jump 20 times, and also do 10 squats. And when she's finished, he says he wants 10 push-ups, then tells her to hold a plank position for 20 seconds as well, and she says she can't do anything more, collapsing stiffly to the ground. Then Gongja asks if they understand now, saying that, as they can see, the witch has already been subjugated by him, and now, no matter what happens, she cannot disobey his orders. It's impossible for her to continue threatening the Empire, so they can relax. And they think that if that's what the emissary is saying, it's fine. But one of the soldiers tells them to wait, asking what on earth he's doing, because they came there to subjugate the witch. But then, Sarbaste says that according to the emissary, she has already been subjugated. However, the other questions how he can believe that, because, to begin with, the only evidence that Boy has of being the founder's emissary is a mere sword. But Sarbaste doesn't like him calling it a mere sword at all, asking if he is doubting the Empire's authority, questioning if he is doubting that sword is the will of the goddess. But the Pope's man says that His Holiness the Pope gave him an order. However, they start to argue, as it seems they are trying to place the Pope's will above that of the founder. And the MC clearly remembers that kind of scene with people fighting right in front of him, and says he can now understand why Kuro divided the hunters. But as they continue and the fight has no end, that lizard man tells them to please get out of the way, because from what he sees, the current problem is quite simple. He wants to confirm that the young man is indeed the founder's emissary, that the woman is truly a witch, and that the emissary has indeed subjugated the witch. As long as they can confirm these three uncertainties, the problem can be resolved, and they ask Gongja how he plans to confirm these things. And the lizard man says that the object in his hand is the soul orb, granted to him by the Emperor of the Mermaid people, and if a drop of blood is placed on this orb, it's possible to know if the owner of that blood has a good or bad soul. So they tell him to come forward, because if that woman is indeed the witch and he is indeed the founder's emissary, he must accept the test of that orb. Considering the MC has, say, about 5,000 homicides under his belt, it might just show that he's not such a good person. I'm just guessing. And that lizard man talks more about the soul orb, saying that when the blood of a good soul touches the orb, it emits light, but if the blood of an evil soul touches the orb, it will turn black. He says that if that woman is indeed the witch, and he is indeed the founder's envoy, they must accept that test, and the good and bad deeds they have done, the orb will prove everything. And so Gongja realizes it's like the paladin's lie detector and the sword saint's detective vision. The lizard man then states that yes, his people are good at making items of this type. He tells Gongja he can try as much as he wants, but warns there's no point regretting it later, because lying before the orb is useless. So they will start by verifying the woman's soul, and with that, he makes a cut, takes the blood, and throws it onto the orb. They notice that the soul is exceedingly evil, asking how many evil deeds and murders she has committed, stating that she is truly a cursed being, and they believe she is undoubtedly the Demon King. Then he says it's the turn of the self-proclaimed founder's emissary, asking if the MC is ready, and the MC replies that he always is. The lizard man then states that lying is useless, ordering him to give his hand, and when his blood touches the orb, it shines purely, almost blinding everyone with the intensity of its light. At this, they question what on earth it is, and one of them mentions the drop of water given by the current queen, asking why such a beam of light is emanating from the orb. The lizard man then asks what on earth his soul is, and how this is possible, questioning how many lives he has saved, noting that this person is light itself. Everyone assumes he is the light, asking if they can't see how bright his soul is. The Pope's subordinate says he doesn't know about this, but the lizard man asks why he doesn't know, inquiring if it's perhaps invisible to the leader of the paladins. He replies that it's not that, he just doesn't understand what they mean by the light. The lizard man then states that this is why he doesn't speak with mere inferior humans, because no one with such a soul could lie to them, and this man is the founder's emissary. No, he even thinks he must be the goddess's apostle, and the MC proudly affirms to them that he is indeed the goddess's apostle. They say that by all appearances he is the light, and it seems to be a shimmering light. And the sword also shines, the sword that Emperor Egwene or someone similar used before, then asking where he came from. Everyone continues to buy into Gongja's lie, except for the Pope's subordinate. For even if he is the founder's emissary and light itself, why was he blocking their path, asking if they had already forgotten, stating that they must burn that place, and that His Holiness the Pope was not only concerned with the witch, but also with the heretics who followed her. They cannot let them escape divine punishment. The Demon King then begins to call the MC's attention, asking him to do something, and that guy says that if he is truly an apostle of the goddess, he must lead their way to apply divine punishment. Gongja then ponders these words, for the best lies are formed by 90% truth and 10% falsehood. The MC then tells the temple's holy knights to be careful with their words, saying that it is not for them to decide how divine punishment should be applied, and that he is the one who decides it. He has already gathered all evil, and divine punishment has already been applied, stating that he will show them. He then summons a multitude of skeletons, and they scream that these are demons. minions, asking what these horrible things are. He states that this is his duty, asking how this witch could be the only evil in this world, saying that each of these phantoms he has gathered are evil doers, with actions as wicked as the witches. They are surprised that all these monsters are what he has gathered. He says that the goddess gave an order to punish all evil that corrupted the world in her name, and his mission is to subjugate all evil in the world and lead all demons to hell, and what they are seeing now is his hell. The lizard man is completely moved, because the goddess's apostle was doing all this alone without them knowing, and Gongjia agrees with him. He thinks that no one even recognized the apostle, asking how he, being a mere human, managed to go through this hell alone. The MC simply says that this is his duty, stating that there is no longer any need for them to punish the witch or her minions. They will suffer forever in his shadow, and he is their hell. And they all swallow the lie that the apostle had been saving them all this time without their knowledge, even if it's not entirely a lie, and Gongjia agrees. The emperor says he has nothing more to teach him, telling him to go ahead, stating that his instructor there is nothing more than a child, and cannot deal with a scoundrel like him. The MC thinks that's quite modest of him, saying he doesn't have much to learn from his evil personality. He then says he is sure everyone can see now, and this is the goddess's will, her divine retribution, assuming they certainly do not intend to defy the strict will imposed by the goddess. But then the Pope's Knight asks him again if those atrocious demons are truly imprisoned, and says that what he means is that if those demons were to escape back into the world, the damage would be immense. And MC is asked if he wants to confirm that he personally imprisoned those creatures, calling one of them forward, and he asks MC what he intends to do with that skeleton. MC replies that he wants to clear their doubts, ordering the skeleton to retrieve its memories. Then, the former Flame Emperor appears, speaking to MC, cursing him and asking what kind of problem MC has with him to turn him into something like this. He declares that he wouldn't be satisfied even if MC burned in boiling water, vowing to kill him, calling him every name, asking how he dared to do this, and stating that no matter what, he will truly wipe out MC's lineage. MC then states that, as they can see, this man is a wrongdoer as evil as the witch, but he goes further, saying that he is arguably an even worse monster than the witch. For the witch was born a monster, but this man committed atrocious crimes despite being human. They are utterly surprised as the Flame Emperor continues to curse everyone around, asking if they've lost their minds. Then MC simply orders him to dance, and the Emperor actually complies with everything he asks. Everyone is astonished by MC giving them orders like this. MC states that the demons can never defy his orders, asking if they are still worried. With that, the leader of the Pope's Knights kneels before MC, asking if they can at least have the honor of knowing his name. MC introduces himself to all of them, and they agree to do as he commanded. Thus, he completes the normal stage, the secret mission Hero of the Frozen World, and also the boss stage. MC simply gained an even more overpowered ability, acquired a servant, and gained the ability to constantly mess with the idiotic Flame Emperor, all through sheer manipulation. He manipulated everyone the entire time, used hacks, but still, he delivered on his promise. The system announces that the completing party consisted of only one individual, the King of Death. The reward calculation is complete, and rewards will be distributed within 24 hours of his entry into the 21st floor. The Emperor thinks it's insane that MC would complete the boss stage this way and then just chat. MC thinks that it doesn't matter if he's crazy or not. He completed all floors up to the 20th exactly as he wished. No hunter died, no one from the Empire or continent perished, and he even managed to save that little girl. The 20th floor would likely have been completed on its own, even if he had done nothing, because the fire and the disappearance of the village also constituted a form of conclusion. As long as there is an appropriate conclusion, the tower doesn't care if it's a happy ending or not. Otherwise, Yosoha wouldn't have been able to clear up to the 40th floor. Therefore, this isn't the world predetermined by the tower, nor is it an ending that appeared because there was no other choice. He thinks that on that day, the rains did not fall from the heavens and the flames did not lick the ground. He believes this is the ending he chose. The Emperor questions if this thing is truly part of the ending MC chose, with that thing dancing behind him. The Flame Emperor then questions why MC doesn't stop it. MC finds it absolutely beautiful, while the Emperor simply tells the boy to go to hell. Meanwhile, a public announcement is made. The 20th floor has been cleared. The announcement repeats, and MC thinks it's a pain as there's no internet around. The Emperor asks if MC hadn't decided not to care about others' responses. However, MC, with a damn cynical face, questions when he ever said such a thing. The Emperor asks if MC didn't say it was more important to gain recognition from individuals like the Black Witch or Old Man Marcos, rather than the general public. MC then asks if the Emperor doesn't know that the more, the merrier, stating that he will gain recognition from all of them. The Emperor then thinks MC is far too greedy, wondering how anyone could be like that. Just then, the witch arrived, grabbing the MC and hugging him, calling him crazy, truly crazy, a disturbed individual who isn't even 20 yet, saying he's absolutely insane. The MC told the witch that it hurt, while Marcos watched their interaction. She was even more surprised, realizing he had indeed cleared the 20th floor in just 5 days, calling him crazy, and saying he probably didn't know how many people were going insane in the tower, telling him to look. She mentioned she quickly went to the first floor and took pictures of those, and now had several news articles about everything he had done on her phone. She said there were so many articles she couldn't even photograph them all, but stressed that he needed to understand. It wasn't just the tower like this, but the outside world, too. The headlines might vary, but they were all about him, where he was from, what kind of life he lived, and how he instantly became a ranker. But then, the MC asked her to wait a moment, asking if she took all those photos herself, to which she replied, of course. So he asked if that meant, just to show him the articles she was writing, she had teleported to the first floor, then searched through all those articles one by one, and took screenshots of each one, and she confirmed that, when put that way, yes she did. And this person, being the second-ranked hunter and the highest authority figure, did all that, making the MC wonder if she was an angel. She then said, just to be safe, that he shouldn't read the comments, as envious people had bombarded the comment sections. Even though what he did was incredible and achieved without any casualties, he shouldn't pay attention to them. But the Emperor, seeing how naive the boy was, asked if he truly considered people angels just because they treated him a little nicely. The MC thought that if she wasn't an angel, perhaps she must be a goddess, and the Emperor thought that guy was absolutely insane. Then she told him to look at something else, saying he had made it to the front page, and that this was the first time something like this had happened in the tower's history. She couldn't believe he went from unranked to 3rd place all at once. The MC then became very excited. She then told him he would have to pay a bit more attention to his actions from now on, and the MC questioned what she meant by actions. She explained that he had currently joined all 5 major guilds, even though he was actually independent, and if a hunter was 3rd in rank, he should have a title on the level of a guildmaster. While it was true he was in all 5 major guilds simultaneously, being a regular guild member didn't suit him anymore. The MC then thought about becoming a guild master, but she said that if he preferred to be a lone wolf, destroying everything in his path like an old man, she wouldn't force him. Hearing that, the MC asked if they were talking about them. them, but the girl said to put that aside. She wanted to know who those people were. The MC explained that they were soldiers who had gathered from all parts of the continent and said it was a long story. But after defeating the Demon King, there was an event where these NPCs invaded the 20th floor. At least he thought so. Using a skill and an item's effect, he tricked them into believing he was the emissary of the Empire's founder, and they fell for it. She then noted that he seemed quite talented at lying, but the MC stated that thanks to it, he managed to clear the floor without shedding a single drop of blood. She clarified that she wasn't trying to speak ill of him. In fact, she was quite happy, because thanks to him,